this episode of the Goodrum Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Okay, so over the last couple of weeks, the alcohol content of the show has been pretty damn high, it has to be said. So the alcohol content is taking a little bit of a backseat this week. But that doesn't mean that it's not going to be interesting, because as you can see from the title page of the show, I'm looking at pretty much the core range of Lagavulin. Now, 320 odd episodes of the show, and this is the first time I've managed to do one on Lagavulin. I just never managed to get enough of the juice together, shall we say, whether samples or actually physically buying the bottles, because as we know, Lagavulin is pretty damn expensive. I mean, 16-year-old and the Distillers Edition, they're both hitting about 90 quid, 12-year-old well over 100 quid. You need deep pockets these days to appreciate Lagavulin, and it's not like you can pick it up in the independents either. You can't pick up a nice sort of young Lagavulin for a few quid. They just don't exist. I mean, as far as I'm aware, to my knowledge, shall we say, I've only ever tasted one independent bottling of Lagavulin, and it was this one. The Murray McDavid Mission Number 1 Series 1979 24-year-old. And yes, as you can see, it is unopened. That's because, yes, I got the opportunity to taste it, but I tasted that directly out of the cask. Not to bore you to death about this, and I've probably mentioned it once or twice before, that back in 2002, 2003, something like that, I was given the opportunity to spend a week working up at Bracladdy, trialling their whisky school, allegedly, although it was a bit more, shall we say, random. But anyway, at the end of the week, sort of Jim McEwen called me into his office and basically said, "You've been here for a week, have you enjoyed it?" And I said, "Yeah, it's been amazing." I mean, I'd only been in the whisky industry a couple of years, and it was a huge eye-opener. And so he said, "Well, I bet you want to taste some whisky now, don't you?" And I go, yeah. So he took me over to one of the warehouses, and basically the first cask he went to and said, "You have got to taste this. This is stunning." And it was the 79 Lagavulin. And I wish I had the knowledge back then that I had now, because I don't know whether I'd have appreciated it more. I mean, I was blown away at the time, has to be said. I mean, who isn't? When you get left alone in a warehouse full of casks of whisky and told to just help yourself, it's just like sweetie shop. My tasting notes from the time were crap, really, at the end of the day. I mean, I really hadn't got a clue what the hell I was doing, but it's one of those memories that will always live with me, I guess. But anyway, so because I've only got 4 whiskies today, I can waffle a bit more. Oh, isn't that fun? So let's talk about Lagavulin. I mean, it's an iconic distillery. It has a fairly short fermentation, around about 50, 55, 60 hours. So quite serially new make, quite heavy. You wouldn't sort of overly categorise it as generously fruity. Just 2 pairs of stills, fairly nondescript, stubby, not a huge amount of reflux. Lin arm angles quite steeply downwards, so you can see what they're aiming for. The style of spirit has got to be sort of big, robust, probably a bit sulphury when it comes off the stills, and needs time in the cask. And thankfully, Diageo allow them to do so. Although we obviously know that there is an 8-year-old, which I have here, which was released for the 200th anniversary of the distillery. And it's now part of their core range. But generally speaking, most people know Lagavulin from the 16-year-old. Quite heavily sherried, big, rich, but, do you get much distillery character? Do you know what Lagavulin tastes like? And certainly, and certainly not considering the amount of bloody caramel that Diageo use in the 16, and it's amazing, isn't it? When you consider it's in a dark green bottle, why? You're aging it in sherry casks. You don't need to add caramel. And I'm not saying Diageo is the only perpetrator of this crime, but I remember at one of the World Whisky Awards sitting next to a very well-known Diageo brand ambassador, and we were having a conversation primarily about some of the distilleries in their portfolio that nothing was being done with, and he turned around to me and said, well, Diageo and bugger all about whiskey anyway, which I thought was a pretty damning comment. But to be honest with you, it's an industry, it's a global, and if they did know about whiskey, really they wouldn't bugger their bloody whiskey up with vast amounts of caramel. And the 16-year-old has really suffered from that. I've tasted so many bottlings that have just been really, really disappointing. So I'm hoping that the 16-year-old sample that I've got here, which was included in this year's World Whisky Awards, isn't well, at least isn't murdered by caramel. Obviously the two American oak bottlings certainly won't have seen any caramel, which is thankful. But anyway, so I guess that's enough of the standing on the soapbox and wagging one's finger at the multinationals. Let's do the fun bit and introduce the lineup. Right, okay, so as I said, we're going to kick off with the 8-year-old. This is the 200th anniversary bottling that was released in 2016. The sample comes from the whiskey magazine when I was doing that. So it's bottled at 48%, 8 years in refill American oak. I think it's now, like I said, been made part of the sort of core range, for want of a better word. But it's still, not exactly cheap. But well, I'm not going to say any more. We'll talk about that when we taste it. Second one we're going to be looking at is this one. This is the 12-year-old, which you definitely need deep pockets for. And the only thing, it comes out once a year in the special releases. And this is the 2018 release, obviously 12 years old, bottled at 57.8%. Then we're going to move on to the 16. So bottled at 43%, and well, yeah, there's a fair amount of sherry used in that particular bottling, and well, like I said, we'll see how much of the caramel has been used in that particular bottling. And the last bottling we'll be looking at is this one, which is obviously the Distillers Edition, which always makes me laugh, it has to be said. Why don't they just call it the Wood Edition? Because obviously all the Distillers Editions are just, I'm playing a bit devil's advocate here now. It's like, you're not going to detect the distiller's craft in them, are you? They're all sort of generally sort of big and brutish sherry monsters. Some of them aren't. Dalwhinnie was the Distillers Edition, I think, is ex-Amontillado casks, and that's really quite pleasant, and one of the few that I really quite like. Because I've always found this one, the PX one, is just far too much PX. So this is the 1999 distilled, bottled in 2015. And the batch number is LGV4/504, Pedro Ximenez finish. So, well, looking at the colour, anyway. So that's today's lineup. Let's kick off with the 8-year-old. Right, okay, so let's see what the nose gives us on this. Dense, oily, pungent, cereally, well, probably more barley than cereal, I would say. It's got a lovely honeyed note, a sort of slight, sort of acacia honey. Again, there's some lovely dense peat, touch of medicinal notes, pine needles, salt. That is stunning, absolutely stunning. Just whenever people want to sort of purchase a bottle of Lagavulin, I just say buy the 8-year-old. The 8-year-old is absolutely gorgeous. You're getting all of the distillery character. There's a lovely, I wouldn't quite go as far as saying fruitiness to it, but there's a semblance of it, and there's a sweetness, there's a bit of honey, there's a nice gritty, earthy peat note, and it's got some lovely intensity. 48% really suits this down to the ground. Now I don't know what the current 8-year-old is like because I haven't tasted it, but if it's you know, it's as good as the nose on this, then well, oh. Anyway, see what the pal's like. Chewy, malty, dense, rich, oily. Obviously, the regime, you know, the sort of short fermentation, sort of lack of reflux, you know, works amazingly well with the spirit. Sweet barley comes from, again, it's a lovely dusty, slightly sooty peat. Touch of coffee, little bit of charred oak. I can just taste a little bit. Not a huge amount of vanilla kind of character. Obviously, refill casks, not giving that sort of creaminess to it, which allows the spirit just to kind of come through and show. Lovely rock salt aftertaste. I mean, that is just a stunning whiskey. It really is, and you know, I just cry when I think of, you know, that being obliterated by sherry. But the nice thing about it is, of course, that you have the option to you know, to pick your poisons, shall we say. But the 8-year-old is just absolutely stunningly good.
Don't you dare.
Right, okay, so let's move on to the 12-year-old. This is bottled at 57.8. Let's see what the nose gives us on this then, shall we? Again, dense, oily, but the alcohol is kind of emphasising a sort of a lime citrus note. Really quite sweet, again quite honeyed, more honey than I was getting on the 8-year-old. Barley, iodine, lemon, yeah, more lemon, elderflower, sort of lime. Oh, I mean, that doesn't quite have the density of the 8-year-old, but it's certainly got the elegance and it's got the lightness, which I'm guessing is being helped by the alcohol. It's just got a beautiful balance of sweetness and sourness, and you know, it's not stonking peat either. The peat is actually quite restrained. I mean, and it is quite sort of loamy, earthy in character. See what the pal's like. More like the 8-year-old on the palate. Fuller, richer, oilier, more barley. Again, the peat is really only kind of coming through right on the finish. Again, it's quite dry, it's quite dusty, there's a bit of tar, iodine. Again, and the citrus kind of only really kind of comes through on towards the end as well. It's got a lovely salty aftertaste. The alcohol is giving it a punch, but it's not sort of spirity in any way. A little bit of spice as well kind of coming through. A little bit of, not quite sort of sweet-ish kind of peppery spice. Touch of wood char as well. I mean, that is just just absolutely stunning. I mean, you could drink that quite comfortably without needing to put any water with it at all, but you know, for the sake of experimentation, we will put a little drop of water with it and see what happens. Now that's really brought out the dense, rich character of the spirit, almost kind of fleshy fruit, certainly more like the 8-year-old now. Herbaler, heather, maybe a bit of gorse, thyme, possibly. Peat has become slightly herbalier, if that's a word, herbalier. Well, after a few glasses of this, yes, it is a word. Peat again. I mean, it never was sort of hugely peated to start off with, or didn't give the inference of huge peat. I mean, it's again, it's kind of like a waft of peat, you know. Oh, I'm getting all yeah. I'm even getting a little bit of tangerine as well. Tangerine, orange. I mean, this is frankly just stunningly good. I mean, really complex. And like I said, you know, you murder this with sherry. Oh, and I know that not very many people are going to be able to fork out 100 and something odd pounds for a bottle of this, but believe you me, if you love Lagavulin, this is the expression to get, without a shadow of a doubt. Anyway, let's see what the parts are now. Even sweeter, but not overly sweet. Again, the alcohol balances that up. Bit of citrus as well, lime, almost gooseberry kind of note. I'm getting a lot more peat now on the palate. Certainly, again on the finish, it's got that lovely dustiness. There's a bit of tar, a bit of oiled rope, a little bit of iodine. But it is so juicy, and like I said, you know, rich, dense, oily, barleyed. I mean, you know, it is a stunning malt at the end of the day. Oh, that's good. Right, okay, time for the 16-year-old. See what the nose gives us. Actually, it's not the worst nose, or the worst nose of a 16-year-old I've come across. There's a bitterness there in the background, which kind of does say there is some caramel at work here, but in actual fact, it's not too heavy-handed. It's not blanketed. That's been the big issue I've had with a lot of 16-year-old bottlings, is that they've just smelt flat. This has actually got some life to it. It's got some iodine, a touch of citrus, earthy, gritty peat. And the sherry is, I wouldn't quite say, it's very soft. It's very almost nondescript. It's kind of sherry by numbers to a certain extent. Yes, it's got some richness, it's got some seaweedy notes, it's got some salt, but you know, it hasn't got the complexity of the 12-year-old by a long way. I mean, you know, the sherry is kind of, yes, it's added a little bit of homogeneous, sherried, raisinated fruit kind of notes, but you know, and okay, yep. So maybe after dinner, you know, log fire, all that kind of gubbins. You know, it's not a bad whiskey, but you know, if you it's chalk and cheese, you know, the 12-year-old in this. I mean, it really is. Anyway, let's see what the balance on. It's soft, it's harmonious. Plenty of raisinated fruit, not getting too much flattened caramel flattening. Again, There is a little bitterness which could sort of indicate that, and I know full well that they use caramel. So please don't comment and say, oh, they don't use caramel, because I know they do. I've seen export bottlings, shall we say. There's a bit of iodine. There's a slight, almost violety note. I mean, it is a lovely whiskey. It's even with the caramel. But it just lacks the intensity of the 8-year-old and the 12-year-old. I mean, yes, all right, the 12-year-old is a cask strength, I know that, but it's kind of, yeah, okay, it's nice, it's pleasant. I mean, it's got a pleasant aftertaste. The peat kind of lingers really nicely, and the salt. But you know, on the scale of sort of complexity, it's nowhere near the 12. But you know, it is what it is at the end of the day, I suppose. Right, and finally we're on to the Distillers Edition, or the Wood Edition, as they should really call it, as I said earlier. Let's see what those give us. Whopping great sherry. I mean, it really is just dense, treacle, tar, burnt wood, burnt coffee, bit of peat. I mean, it's got a slight fragrance to it. I mean, I think of all of the Distillers Edition Vulins that I've tasted, this has not got a bad balance. I mean, you know, there's a bit of citrus, there's a bit of salt. I mean, there's no barley, there's no distillery character, there's no, you know, but I guess if you were sort of saying spirit versus, or sort of vaguely spirit versus wood, yeah, it's not too badly balanced. The sherry is although big and there, I mean, I could drink this, you know, I could drink anything, to be bluntly honest with you, well, apart from fermented yak piss possibly, but you know, it's the least interesting of the four, shall we say, from a nasal point of view anyway. Let's see what Pat's like. It's big, it's sherried, it's winey, I don't really get much peat actually, there's a bit on the finish. It's very soft, it's all very, you know, there's no intensity. It's just, yeah, why not bottle it at 46% or 50%? Well, because the bloody price would go up even further, wouldn't it? You know, it's still as expensive enough as it is. There's juicy, there's raisinated fruit, there's a little bit of fig, there's some peat smoke, but again, you know, it's just you kind of like go, the 12. Why? What is the point of this? I mean, you know, I know there are that love sherried monsters, but it doesn't have anything there's no grittiness, there's no rawness, there's no stinkiness. You know, it's not like you're going to go put your nose down and go, oh my God, that's a raw sherry cask. It's not. It's all very polished. It's all very nice. It's all very safe. You know, yeah, there's a bit of spiciness. There's a bit of peat, but you know, it really is, frankly, duller than ditch water. I mean, it just, yeah. I mean, I stock it because people like it and they like to buy it, and you know, at the end of the day, you know, as a retailer, you have to basically accept that not everybody has got your taste. You know, there are people that like things that you may well not like, and you know, people want to buy these things, then fine. I've got absolutely no issue with that at all. But you know, I would always go, buy the 8-year-old, buy the 8-year-old, please. It's great. You know, that is just.
And don't get it right.
Right, okay, so let's sum today's episode of the show up. I know you guys love it when I taste sherry monsters, and believe you me, when I get round to doing a Glen Parkless tasting, that'll be interesting. And I have got one in the pipeline. I'm trying to, I need to dig out a sample if I can ever find it. It's probably in a box in the cupboard, buried. But anyway, let's talk about Lagavulin. It is an iconic distillery. I mean, there is no doubt about that. And the spirit it produces is characterful and frankly damn good. And they stick it in sherry. I mean, the 8-year-old is absolutely beautiful. I mean, I don't know what that's retailing for at the moment. I mean, I'm guessing it's somewhere in the 60s, which is expensive for an 8-year-old, I know. But I mean, you know, that is as close as, damn it, that you're going to get to the real Lagavulin experience. This is Lagavulin with a little bit of rawness and a lot of loveliness, it has to be said, you know. You get all the character, you can understand what they are trying to do with their spirit, and that at the end of the day is what I want to know from a distillery. I don't want to know what fancy bloody cask you bought from, you know, out of Mongolia or wherever. You know, I want to know what your spirit is like, you know, which basically means refill bourbon and not too much oak, you know. I like the simple things in life. Like the 12-year-old with the simple well, no, that's really complex and bloody expensive. But that is just that is just absolutely what you want from Lagavulin. I mean, it has the density, it has the richness, but it has elegance to a certain extent. It has a sort of a lovely citric kind of character which balances the richness. It is a magnificent whiskey. And there's nothing more to say. It is a magnificent whiskey, full stop. The 16, like I said, the biggest issue I have with the 16 is one of consistency. It is such an inconsistent whiskey. It's basically a case of, whoops, I put a bit too much caramel in this vat. Oh, never mind. I've tasted some, like this particular bottling, which is pleasant and doesn't appear to be hampered overtly by caramel, and then I've tasted other bottlings that really have been awash with the bloody stuff, you know, like it's almost like a bloody oil slick, you know. And I just wish that Diageo would just stop doing it. You know, there's no need. Educate your customers that every bottling is a batch bottling. There is going to be differences in coloration, and you know, just sort of tell them that. Whiskey drinkers are not stupid people. You seem to think that they are, that they won't understand this, but they will if you tell them, if you educate them, rather than just go, oh, let's stick a load of E150 in there, you know. And the Distillers Edition, well, you know, it is what it is, you know what you're going to get. It's Pedro Ximenez, it's big, it's chunky, it's sherried, it's yada yada yada, you know, you love it, you hate it, you know, and personally, it's it's one of those really divisive things at the end of the day, but, you know, anyway, so my conclusion from this lovely tasting of Lagavulin is, if you are going to buy Lagavulin, buy the 8-year-old, or if you are incredibly wealthy, buy the 12-year-old. Just forget about the other two, because that is the purity and the brilliance of the distillery. Just there, you know, that is it. You know, don't need to sort of worry about these two at all. Forget them, you know. Just buy the 12-year-old, enjoy it, and you know. Anyway, I think I've said enough. I hope you've kind of got the idea. Anyway, right, so that's this week's episode of the show done. It'll be a fairly quick one, I imagine, although I think I've kind of gone on a little bit, but I shall get on my soapbox now and bid you good dramming and good afternoon.